You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
We'll try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today my guest is David Hunt, sort of web developer, graphic designer. I'm not quite sure how to describe you, but I've had listeners request that I do some content on more cutting edge technology, talking about the intersection of traditional and digital tools. And you are the perfect person to talk about that because you are doing a new project that we're going to learn all about here. But thank you so much for taking the time to come join us, David Hunt.
And thank you for having me, Kyle. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to it.
Okay, so you've got a new project you're launching. This is, as I understand it, a collaborative, massive digital kind of mural project. Can you just start off with, I'll get into more detail later, but just the broad strokes of what is this project and, how can people get involved?
Yeah, of course. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I like to kind of start off by phrasing it as a Earth-sized collaborative mural, which a more concrete way to think about it is basically if you took like Google Maps and divided the whole world into these little grid squares, and anybody in the world can come along and claim one of these grid squares if it hasn't already been claimed and create little doodles or even like professional level artwork and claim them on a temporary basis. The general premise is that each piece of art, you claim it for about like 24 hours is the default. But everybody who sees it on the platform, if they like it, they give it an upvote, and that kind of extends the expiration date. So it's kind of this automatic way of allowing like the most quality work to be seen by more people without all this kind of algorithmic stuff that we see on social media that a lot of people have been frustrated with. Kind of causing a lot of people's art to basically just not ever be shown to the people that are trying to follow them. And there's all sorts of stuff to talk about there. But that's the general premise.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you've got like a digitized version of the globe as the canvas that we can paint on. Yeah. And people are claiming a small square and they can then draw over it. So I could draw on the Eiffel Tower and not get in trouble.
Exactly. It's legal graffiti. And yeah, actually the squares are quite large for the launch version of this. So the like right now as it stands, basically most of the squares are almost like city sized, which does create kind of a scarcity element to it because, there's only one New York City that has the Statue of Liberty. But yeah, you touched on another point there that I briefly alluded to when we talked earlier, but a really cool thing about this is when you're claiming a square from a specific geographic location, it allows you to pull up photos that are, of course, licensed properly from people who've taken photos from places like Unsplash. But basically, anyone who's taken a photo of relevant landmarks, it pulls those up automatically, and you can use that as a background for your doodles. So yeah, you can draw a mustache on the Statue of Liberty, change the faces of Mount Rushmore, or whatever you like to do.
So I can literally paint the town. That is kind of a fun idea. But then I'm curious as I'm envisioning this, you've got a world to explore with these different images that people are going to be drawing and putting out there. How do they all connect up to each other? But and I mean that both like from the standpoint of the logistical, the content creator. Like if I'm the artist drawing,
right,
how does mine relate to someone else's? Is this like, the surrealist exquisite corpse style where there are little marks at the edges of the tile and I know I need to connect up to that? Or do I see what other people have done and I'm responding to that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think that's really a big part of the power of this kind of art platform is that it kind of creates this natural playfulness of somebody creates a piece of artwork, and you naturally are kind of encouraged to extend their artwork. You know, if somebody draws something to the north of where you plan on drawing, you kind of almost naturally want to extend their character. If, you know, for instance, maybe they did like the top half of a character, you know, as you mentioned, the kind of exquisite corpse idea of continuing on the drawing and either making it very silly or taking it seriously and kind of trying to make something you know, profound and interesting from what somebody else has drawn. I've kind of included that in some of the original artworks that I've done. Like I did this kind of like diver where he's like reaching into the next panel as one of the very first tiles that I ever drew for the concept. But yeah.
Okay, so people are truly collaborating, and I like that idea of like a community of artists coming together to make a massive piece. And I like the idea of people, you know, upvoting and positive engagement and everything like that. Like, you know, the comments section of so much social media can be a bit stifling
toxic, yeah,
to people. But I like that you're working to build this kind of artistic community in a digital age. And so I guess, you know, before we get too much deeper into that, I do want to start with just like, how'd you get this idea?
Yeah. So it's been a long time coming, to be honest, because I actually had this idea really about like 5 years ago back in college. It took a different form. It's kind of evolved since then, but the original idea, I kind of was thinking of it almost in terms of like an economy of art was the initial premise. I was like, what if you created this like giant grid of connected artworks, and the whole economy essentially runs on, you know, how good of a quality of like work can you do, and it allows you to expand your kind of like artistic domain if people enjoy your work. So you kind of have like more territory relative to how quality the community perceives your work. So that was the original vision for it. But that idea, I mean, I'm a game designer by trade, so I have lots of ideas that just sit on the shelf for a very long time until the time kind of is right. And what really kind of brought this about, I had really almost forgotten about this idea. But a few months back, there was a hackathon project that I was interested in entering, and I didn't have any like specific ideas, so I was kind of like mulling over some of the previous ones, and this idea came back to me, but it hit me with a whole different kind of angle because I had just recently read some comments from some artists on, I forget if it was like Instagram or Twitter or what, but somebody was basically saying that they were just so frustrated with the current way in which art is dealt with on social media, where they basically aren't even able to like post things in the same way they were. Like it was hard to be an artist like 5 years ago, but now with AI in the mix, it's just incredibly difficult because on the one hand, you have people being accused of creating AI artwork. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but it's like this whole witch hunting thing. So like real artists sometimes will be accused of creating AI artwork. And on the other side, of course, there are people literally like trying to pass off AI generated artwork as real hand drawn artwork, and those kind of scams. So there's all sorts of mistrust in the art community. So that kind of had just like resonated with me and into my subconscious. And when it came back around to that idea, I was like, oh my God, I could create this art platform that is literally AI free by design, a human only platform where all the art is done within the art platform itself. So there's never any chance for like uploading of AI artwork, and it's this very self-contained experience. And also, you know, very wholesome, just like, you know, you get to collaborate with other artists around the world and not have to worry about if it's AI or not. So.
And that's interesting. Now, as you're bringing up AI, it is obviously a very hot topic right now.
Yep.
Generative AI is really interesting in what it is unleashing for good and for ill. And so I hear you saying something that I find kind of worth teasing out a bit there. You were saying people are accused of using AI and it's not real art or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
That
yeah.
real, and I'm still trying to work in my own mind with how I think of AI as an art making tool, because on the one hand, I I don't like to close off the door to different tools. And I would imagine as a tech guy and a developer, on some level, you have to feel the same way,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's nuance to it. I mean, I think a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction to it one way or the other. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few different kind of angles to it. But to me, at least, I think that I don't personally think that AI artwork is super enjoyable to look at most of the time. And of course, there are these ethical aspects that a lot of people talk about with, like, where was the AI trained? Like, was it trained on artworks that were licensed properly? Where did they get all this data? And of course, it's not like artists are getting any kind of kickbacks for, like, every time the training model is used to generate new artworks. So it's not a very artist friendly model for certain. But yeah, I will say that, like, for certain purposes, maybe I could see the direction where it's like, okay, you're generating certain things that don't necessarily need to be like the hand drawn sort of aspect. So I think there is some nuance to it, but in general, like, I don't like the idea of just replacing artists by and large in favor of AI. I don't think that's sustainable or really makes all that much sense.
Yeah, well, and I certainly, I'm going to take a bold stance and say I'm in favor of artists and them having a way to make a living. So I certainly don't like the idea of AI tools and generative tools, usurping the artist's space. And as you said, there are serious ethical issues with the data that are being scraped for training all these large models. But I also think there is the compelling argument to be made that it can help a person to execute their vision. And, there can be, I think, an appropriate use for the tool. I'm still trying in my own head to figure out where the appropriate use case is. But for you, I'm hearing you saying that, like, you recognize that it's a hot button issue. It's sort of a fraught territory when you get into the AI stuff. And so you're just sidestepping it, and you're saying you want this to be all human made because really the point is about human connection. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we if we want to get philosophical with it, I mean, we can talk about, like, what art means to you and what it means to me. But to me, yeah, art really is about, like, kind of expressing yourself. Like, you have some kind of internal vision that you want to put out into the world. And, people may or may not be receptive to that. But I think that AI kind of shortcuts that in a way that kind of degrades the meaning of that expression. Because to me, at least, like, when you're creating a piece of artwork, you're making all these kind of micro decisions and choices when you're, like, creating the layout and everything, all these little details. But when you do that with AI, you're kind of, I mean, I will say that there are some nuances to it, but, like, by and large, like, if you're putting in, like, a simple sentence, like, just like a man standing with a sword over his head and these very generic things, like, when it takes 20 seconds to write a prompt and you spit out this AI generated artwork, I don't really see that as, like, creating art. It's I kind of have this internal metaphor in my head of it being, like, a bit like ordering fast food versus, like, cooking a home cooked meal sort of thing, where you're with AI, it's like you're pushing a button to, like, order something off of a menu that just, boom, gets delivered very quickly. You had nothing to do with the process of it being created, other than kind of making your selection about, like, what came from the menu. Versus, like, buying the ingredients and, like, doing this whole kind of home cooked meal experience where it's completely different. And obviously the taste ends up being usually better than fast food if you do a decent job with it. But that's
I
kind
don't,
of my.
but I catch your point.
Yeah. But the skill cap, in theory.
No, I take your point. And, when we get into that philosophical, like, what is art? Because most people, when you ask them, really can't come up with a workable definition. I mean, most people will say, like, art is paintings and drawings and sculptures. They can give examples. It's kind of like that old Supreme Court case where they said, you know it when you see it, although that was on a topic that I can't really delve into on an all ages show. But I think, the best definition I've ever read and always gone by for art is the product of human creativity. And I think that is a strong working definition, at least from my perspective. And in my head, I categorize AI much the same way I look at photography, where it's like, yeah, anyone can make it and you can allow the tool to do most of the work, but there are people who thoughtfully do it. There's a difference between like just pressing a button and snapping a photo and taking a good photo with, a good balanced composition and all that sort of stuff. But to sidestep all of that, because I think, I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole when our main topic is about handmade human-generated art. You're saying you've made this platform as a space where it's all human-made, right? There are no AI tools at play. And, for listeners who didn't catch it, because I think you said it very briefly, but stuff is made within the app. Is that correct? So explain how it's made within your app, but it's also human made.
So it's at the moment a relatively simple kind of drawing platform. I eventually would like to get it to the level of being like a professional grade drawing tool on the level of like Procreate and these other ones that are, of course, very popular and famous. But at the moment, it's relatively simple. But you have essentially a drawing canvas. So, for instance, if you wanted to, go claim New York City, you click on the little square, kind of pulls up this. Well, the first thing that happens is you actually get to choose a theme, which is part of the kind of gamified aspect of this mural, is that it presents you with a few different word choices as your theme. And you can kind of lean into this as much as you like. But it gives you a theme, so there'll just be various nouns, essentially. But, whatever it might be, you end up drawing that theme in this little like canvas, and you can kind of see all the adjacent squares that are next to you. So if you want to kind of playfully lean into connecting with other people's squares, it kind of gives you a little bit of perspective on that. But it's really just a, basic toolbar, undo button, basic brush, eraser, color picker. I do allow you to do like a little eyedropper thing as well for adjacent artwork, so you can match the colors if you want to like properly extend their work. Like one example, I commissioned a number of small artists to create some art initially for the launch, and there's this kind of underwater seascape, so it's very helpful to be able to match the color of the ocean in the panel next to you, and pull that into your own.
And that is that's kind of cool. I like that you're bringing in some different artists and that you have the tools in place for people to be able to draw right over the I guess canvas or photograph the space they're claiming. They can see that. And you've alluded to the eyedropper, but I want to get a little bit more into the logistics and get into the weeds a little bit about how this is all going to work and how it looks and what people can expect and how they can use the tools. So after a short break, I want to dive a little bit deeper into all that.
That's great.
Welcome back. My guest this week is David Hunt, the developer behind earthboard.art. And I would actually say the artist behind earthboard.art because I think this is a creative project. This is a global creative endeavor because, you not only were coding it and executing the functions, you were thinking about like, what's the broader picture that I want to create? What's the experience for people? And to me, that's an artistic process. You're thinking about the user experience, from the creative aspect as well as like the display of this piece and all of that. And I think that's really cool. So thank you for coming on here to, nerd out with me a little bit on this stuff because I actually really do like digital art. I don't always understand it, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah, no, and I very much appreciate you taking me on here, and it's been a great time so far.
So before the break, you were talking a little bit about how you've got drawing tools right there in the app. Like, it's maybe not quite as many tools and different kinds of brushes as Procreate or my go-to, the Autodesk Sketchbook app, but you're drawing right on your device. So it's probably mobile friendly. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
And for people who want to check it out, it's earthboard.art. I'll put a link in the show notes, but earthboard.art is the site you can go to check this out. Now, when you talk about claiming a space, can you just walk me through what all this looks like? Because when I go to my Sketchbook app, if I want an image in there, whether I'm doing a digital collage or I'm using something as a reference, I have to go through like 5 different menus to like, select an image and then select my camera roll and then find the right one and then resize it and all that sort of stuff. How do you claim the image, and does it go does it just you scroll through a map, here's the space I want to claim, and then boom, it opens up in the drawing tools? Or like, what's this process look like?
Yeah, great. So basically the process is, I talked about it a little bit before, but once you've selected a square, and then you select sort of the theme that you want to go with for the artwork, one of the options that you have in the actual like drawing menu, it's basically treated just like another tool. So you've got just a few basics. As I said, it's a relatively simple drawing app at the moment, but you've got the brush, the eraser, and you've got a background kind of toolbar, which when you click on that, it kind of opens up and allows you to either just pick a standard like color background, or you can pick from the photos that are relevant to that area. So again, going with the New York City example, basically it's just you click on the Photos tab and it automatically pulls up all of these relevant landmarks. It does all this in the background. It's meant to be a very seamless kind of user experience, rather than trying to let people have like way too many options that it becomes kind of like daunting. So instead, it's really just a carousel with left, right kind of arrows, and you've got about 10 photos to choose from for any given square in the entire grid. So if a landmark exists within the bounds of that square, so New York City, you're going to have Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building pictures, Central Park. These are all going to be like sort of the pictures that'll naturally be available to you that you can kind of draw from.
So then when you find the squares, is this to use a probably fairly dated reference? I think of that there was that old it was like a stunt someone did of the $1 Million website where they said like they'll sell pixels for $1 each or whatever, and people put whatever they want on there. Is that like the claiming of the square? Is it a web page that has a map of everything that's up there, and you can see which spaces have been claimed, and then you click on a space where you want to go on the map and zoom in? Or are you typing into like to search for New York? Or are you you get what I'm saying? Is this a graphic interface?
Yeah, so I try to again, I have a design background, so I try to always think of things in terms of just creating like as seamless of a user experience as possible. So the direction I've taken things so far is basically it acts very much like Google Maps. Like if you pulled that up on your phone, You can, you're navigating with just finger gestures. You can zoom in, zoom out, but it's overlaid with this really cool kind of grid over just land. You cannot claim ocean squares, but it's basically anywhere that has been claimed, you'll see the little drawing associated with that space. And so you can just click on a square and it'll show you more details, like when is that drawing going to expire. And if it's unclaimed, then you just click on it and you can start drawing on that square by just claiming it, assuming you have enough claims. I've kind of gamified the process, so there is some restrictions, so you can't just infinitely claim, all of these different grid squares and put like really crappy drawings down.
Now, I am just going to throw this out there because I did a previous episode on Jason DeCary's Taylor, and I do want to say you can have amazing art on the ocean. So you might want to rethink that restriction of water, because that would be pretty cool. But
you can do coastal areas for sure. Like it's basically, if there's even a sliver of land, well, we count it as like you can claim it, basically, is how it works right now. But yeah.
And for listeners, I'll put another link in the show notes. Jason DeCary's Taylor, if you are not familiar, does amazing underwater sculptures and underwater museums that are installed basically on the ocean floor. But back to the other thing you were saying there was you don't want people to claim a million spaces and just load them up with crappy drawings. Yeah. And I think that kind of hints at a sort of practical concern that one might have. I mean, yes, it seems easy to put in parameters so that someone can't claim a bunch of spaces and fill them up with like 2-second drawings. You can easily put a throttle on how many spaces can be claimed, or you can put a minimal time requirement invested in claiming a space or something like that. But when it comes to the quality, because I think there's probably sort of an ambivalence, I would imagine, in terms of like you want to be open to whatever people want to create. And yet, I think of the classic 1917 Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, which was supposed to be in an exhibition that was open to anyone, unjuried. If you paid your entry fee, it'll be displayed. And his was so shocking and appalling, it was displayed behind a partition, and then
yes,
like nobody sees it. But I guess technically on display. Do you have limitations on like what you will accept from people in terms of their drawings? Like I don't want, I personally wouldn't want to just see, crudely drawn, graphic images like you would find on a bathroom stall or something,
Exactly. Yeah. And that is, of course, one of the main things that I've had to design around. That is the constraint, because anyone who is given freedom inevitably for these kind of things where you can essentially do low effort kind of graffiti, it does tend to devolve to the lowest common denominator, sort of these crude images and humor. So as far as that goes, I do have a moderation system in place, at least as far as trying to create like a relatively welcoming space, so that there are not like, just I don't know how G-rated this podcast is. I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to see like depictions of nude figures, or we don't want to see something that seems violent or hateful or something like that. Something inappropriate.
Exactly. So yeah, the age limit. I'm basically trying to make this as like inviting as possible for even people as young as, ideally, like 13 years old, because this is like a family-friendly kind of like drawing app. So I have some auto moderation in place that basically is going to scan things. And this, I would say, is probably one of the most valid use cases of AI, is using vision models to look at an image and say, okay, is this inappropriate? Because obviously that could be a human job, but who wants to be the person who is looking at nude people all day long and their horrible, crude depictions? So, anyways, that's kind of the basic model of it is preventing like those kind of like super low quality images, but for the most part, it's very open and inviting to just about anything. Like even if you create these like very low quality kind of just fun little doodles, I think there is a lot of charm to that personally. Like as long as there's at least a little bit of effort put into it, even these little stick figures can be entertaining. And that's why it's not as if I'm creating like these hard limits. I'm allowing people to claim squares on a perpetual basis. Currently, the limit is basically you recharge kind of these, I'm calling them pallets is the resource, but every hour you get a new pallet. So you can't be just like churning out like a million of these like terrible doodles. And it kind of forces you to reconsider. It's like, well, I can only do a certain amount of these per day. So I should try a little bit if I want them to be on the board for a while, because again, they only last 24 hours unless people enjoy them and they start upvoting it. It extends it by an hour every single time somebody upvotes it.
See, that's kind of a cool idea that, people are voting to keep and preserve the masterpieces that seem worthwhile. And that seems like a nice way to encourage people to put their best stuff out there, because if you don't, it'll get lost, it'll be forgotten. So the way to maintain your legacy is to put something out there that's worthwhile. That's an interesting approach to that sort of moderation, or it's a nice carrot to put out there for people to do their best stuff.
The goal is, of course, to strike that balance between being overly harsh and not just basically. I want to allow as many people as possible to put their art out into the world, especially given the current landscape of things. To kind of tie that back into what you're saying with the DuPont fountain, it's just that it seems like today with social media algorithms, they are kind of acting as the gatekeepers of art and who actually is allowed to be seen. Because for anyone who's just starting out, like creating new accounts, like on Instagram, it's extremely hard to get your artwork seen by other people. Like you post things, if you have no followers, you get like 20 views and maybe not a single like it's a completely different landscape from what it was maybe like 10 years ago, when you actually like the algorithm was a lot more favorable for new artists and photographers putting their work out into the world. Because now it's kind of devolved into this extractive algorithm where they push the sponsored posts and they don't really care about the organic content. So you're kind of, as an artist, you're just like fighting to even be seen on pretty much all of these platforms. So I really see this as kind of a rebellion against the algorithmic discovery. It's now geographic discovery. Like you can now see things anywhere in the world. There's nobody hiding it. It's there for the entire the entire time until its expiration date, at least. So it's a very transparent system, and there's no like black box shadow banning, all this algorithmic nonsense. So I see that as a step forward from where things are at currently in the art landscape.
I do like that. But then I also start to think about how intimidating it can be for a person who doesn't have the same skills. Like, when we think about, to use, Instagram as the example, since you brought that up, there's the classic Instagram versus reality, or, all of that. Like, we see these people who are doing stuff at such a high level that it can make the rest of us feel, I don't know, unwelcome to join the conversation, or like embarrassed to put our stuff alongside that other stuff. I wonder, as you brought up earlier, theme weeks or themes that you were going to put up there. Is that themes for a certain time period, themes in a certain area? Like how are those themes going? And I wonder, are you going to do stuff that is like, more accessible at different times, or maybe have different tiers to it? Like, here's the, photorealist level of this, and here's the intermediate and the beginning phases or whatever.
Yeah. So as far as the themes go, it's basically just per square. It's pulling essentially just random words from a large database that I have of basically just nouns for the themes. I'm going to further refine that, of course, but at the moment, the way it works is basically you have 3 different themes to choose from for a given square, and these they do kind of over time change. So if you look at a square and you don't like what's there, you can come back later, 24 hours later, and there will be a new set of themes to choose from. So it's kind of daily recycled. And it's also different for individuals. So like if I look at one square and somebody else looks at that same square, they're not necessarily going to see the same themes. So there's a lot of different chances for different opportunities of like, oh, this is like the perfect way to connect to this other person. They drew a diver. I can draw an octopus because that's the theme. But I don't necessarily think you have to lean into the whole themes thing. I just thought it was a fun way to kind of gamify the experience. Because part of the premise is, I don't think I really got into this before, but the themes kind of play into it in that when you see somebody's artwork in the landscape, you can actually click on it and you can guess what their theme is. It's this kind of like Wordle hangman style thing where you get to like type in what you think it is and it'll reveal letters if you're correct for the spot. There was a second half of your question I think I'm missing on. Hold on. What was it?
Well, first of all, I love that game idea of trying to guess at people's themes and stuff like that. Like that, because, and this is the sort of teacher in me,
Yeah.
Because I love stuff that encourages people to engage with other people's work and think critically and try to look and analyze and try to determine what's going on. I think that is wonderful. But I was asking about sort of to, I guess, stick with a gaming model, levels. Because there are, like as you get more experience, you're creating more sophisticated stuff. But, there are certain games where it's like, I can't play with my 10-year-old because he'll just beat my brains out. Like he has so many more hours of experience playing that game than I do. I can't compete, so I don't even want to try.
Yeah, so I mean, I like to think that the general premise is pretty open to anybody in the sense that, like, so somebody could draw something like exquisitely well, like super well rendered, and you can still draw next to them, and you don't necessarily have to like connect to their artwork. Like, it's fully up to you how you want to interpret things. Because I mean, you're prompted with this theme idea, and maybe the theme isn't super relevant, maybe it is, but you kind of have a lot of options about like how you want to interpret things. Like, you don't necessarily have to extend and like treat it as like this extension of their artwork just because it's next to you, which I think is part of the powerful thing about the concept in general, is that it's like everything is individualized, but at the same time, it can be part of a broader artwork if you choose it to be. But like, there's no reason you can't create a standalone piece that stands on its own.
Okay. And now just one more short break, and then I want to ask you a little bit more about sort of where this project lives and how it can live on. I'm back with David Hunt from Earthboard.art. You're talking about this as a massive global mural, right? And on the one hand, I think it's really cool that spaces are refreshed basically every day. Somebody can claim a space unless it's, upvoted and it extends its life on that space. But there's a little part of me that is really sad about the loss of pieces after a certain amount of time. So I want to talk about like display strategies here. Now, presumably the whole mural is a living, changing, organic display, right?
Right.
And that's always going to be accessible and viewable at a static address, right? Like earthboard.art. I go there. I'll always be able to see what's on display at that moment once it launches. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And to that effect about expiration, I'm totally with you there. And I've gone back and forth with myself a number of times about how to handle the expiration. But what I've currently landed on that I'm pretty happy with is the current strategy is basically, for the time being, art that expires doesn't necessarily immediately delete from like visibility, at least initially, because, you know, let's say for the first like couple weeks of launch, we're probably not going to have like an overflowing amount of art anyways. So it'll be cooler to see the whole world fill up with art than to just have them be deleting on a perpetual basis. So they will stick around, but the way it works is you can they will be in the UI. You can kind of see that, oh, this is an expired piece of art. So anybody else can come along and reclaim that location, essentially, especially if it's prime real estate. All the big cities, New York and whatnot, people are probably going to be reclaiming those ones quite a bit. And one more thing that I think is very cool, I don't know if it'll be available at launch, but I have been workshopping a feature. It's basically a history, like time-lapse sort of feature. So you can go back to, it takes snapshots of what the board looked like at every hour since launch. So you'll be able to have like this really cool archive of basically seeing how the world has evolved over time. And you can even play it back as like a fun time lapse of seeing all the artworks popping up across the world as things change and evolve over time in kind of a rapid way. So, yeah.
That is an interesting work of art in and of itself. I love that idea. See, I was thinking like I wish there were a way that, like, you know how you can flag an artwork as inappropriate. I feel like it would be nice if there were a way to flag like this belongs in the Hall of Fame or something. You know,
there is a leaderboard too.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. And how do you envision people? How do you envision people connecting with this? Is this going to be like an app that people can regularly check in on? Is this going to be a website you have to go to? Is this something they can keep in their pocket? Do they get, you know, a streak for coming back every day? Like, you know, how addicted am I going to become?
Very. No. So I'm targeting iOS initially, so it's just going to be iPhones only for the initial launch. But I am creating the app in such a way that, in theory at least, it will be very transferable to a web version. In fact, the original version, I made a very simple prototype that was purely web-based, only worked, of course, on the web. But I think, given the nature of it and the target audience, of course, being a lot of people using iPhones and iPads. iPads are generally considered for digital artists, like one of the main ways in which they create it, you know, using these professional grade drawing tools like Procreate. So that just to me made sense as the initial starting platform. And yeah, it is just kind of cool to have this in your pocket. I do have, of course, you know, fun ways to make it interesting and gamified. So I don't want to pester people too bad, though. I find it very annoying when apps are sending you like a million notifications. So that was one of the first things I did, is set up like a very granular notification system. So you're like, do you want 1 to 2 notifications a day, or do you want 3 or 4? Like, what do you actually want from this app? Because, you know, it's very different for each person. Like, some people try to be very, you know, like they want their phone to not be blowing them up with all sorts of unnecessary notifications. And I want to respect that. So that's kind of my take.
I appreciate that. Although I am very good at ignoring notifications, as I currently sit with 14,000 unread emails in my inbox.
Two kinds of people.
So the little number says. Now, as I said, I really do think of this as a collaborative art project that you're essentially crowdsourcing and trying to get people as collaborators on. What are you hoping people get out of this experience if they join you in creating something, or even, you know, maybe it's also an experience of looking at all of this? Like, I think both are important ways of interacting, and from each of those lenses, like what are you hoping people take from it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things really. But I think to me, the most important part is given the nature of art platforms that currently exist, I think having a sanctuary where people can go to just experience art the way they used to before AI was a factor. Because as I've talked to a lot of people in the art community, they kind of have this almost like they have their guard up when they see new art, and it's like it ruins the enjoyment of it almost, where they're like, oh, is this AI? And they're like kind of analyzing it critically, and it detaches them from the ability to just like take it in and enjoy it. You know what I mean? So that's to me, that's I think the biggest unlock. And of course, just being able to observe like this kind of like global collaborative mural that evolves, and you can take part in it, I feel like is a really powerful thing for people. Like you can know that even when your art fades away in the current moment, it's still captured as like a piece of history in our time lapse archive.
Oh, that's interesting. And I kind of look at this, and I look at the tools involved, and it reminds me of something. And uh, I'm probably gonna name the wrong artist, but when I was in college, I'm talking 20 years ago, I remember seeing an interview with, I'm gonna say maybe Milton Resnick, talking about how he used like the big house painting type brushes to paint on works, because anything, the standard brushes, he said he had too much control with certain tools, and he liked something big and clumsy because of the fact that it gave it this aesthetic of like the kind of thing he made as a child. And
Yeah.
when I think about and I look at the doodles that you've got up there, you talked early about how doodles can be really powerful and wonderful to see. And you talk about the limited tools in the interface. There's something to me that feels very wholesome and innocent, and the way that we created as children, where it's just like, I love this place, and I want to put my favorite designs in this space, and I want to make it bright and colorful, and I want to do this and I want to do that. And there's something I really like about the idea of something that's kind of social and also kind of wholesome and pure, and that people are seeing each other's stuff, and just encouraging people by giving that validation of, I like it, I want to extend this longer.
Mhm.
And I really, really hope that that's how it comes out.
Me too.
That's why I
Yeah.
brought you. That's why I brought you on this show, because I want to see that kind of thing in the world. When I was reading about and looking at the project, I thought like, this could be something nice, and the world needs more of that. And I love the idea of being able to see a time lapse of all the change happening in the world, and I hope it's a positive change. And I want to say a big thank you to David Hunt. Thank you very much for creating that space for people to make something beautiful and put it out in the world for others to see and appreciate, to look at and smile. And I hope this is adopted by a million bazillion people, and it just makes everybody smile every day.
Well, thank you so much, Kyle. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here and just talk about Earthboard and art with you. It's been wonderful. And yeah, I totally share the same vision. I just really hope that we can put something wholesome out into the world that brings people back to that kind of early nostalgia of these childhood drawings and times before AI, when you didn't have to worry about these kinds of things. And it's just a pure wholesome experience of just appreciating art all over the world.
Well, I second that and appreciate your taking the time. And for listeners, if you're interested, like I said, check the links in the show notes. But again, thank you very much, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.